What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. Before we jump in, let's take care of the housekeeping. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. I already see some of you in the chat, and that's fantastic. Don't forget to sign up for Pax8 Beyond. I've had a week full of internal meetings, and Beyond's a big topic, and the numbers are not trending in a direction that is going to guarantee you a ticket if you waste your time. So if you're interested in Pax8 Beyond, make sure you get it. The price does go up at the end of the year, so make sure you get in if you're interested. And with that, let's dive straight into the news. We got a busy one today.
Man, Dom, it's good to see you again. I feel like I've seen you all dang week, actually.
I know, in person. It's wild.
Yeah, we had Pax8 Momentum this week, and it was fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit about it as we get into this. But we do have quite a bit of news, and so we'll dig right into the news so we can bring on some of our awesome security operations team again. So we heard this in the news. You know, we've heard about it actually for a while, but Sony this week shared information on the impact of two recent unrelated hacker attacks. So simultaneously, two separate threat groups compromised Sony in different ways. You had Ransom VC claimed to have compromised all the company systems and offered to sell their data, right? That was quite recent. They actually had screenshots talking about source code and other things. And in the intelligence community, at least in my inner groups that I'm chatting with, there's some questions as to how actual valid that data is, how much value it really is, and all of that. But that notwithstanding, right, they definitely have compromised in some way. In an updated statement on Wednesday, Sony told Security Week it had been investigating the claims with the help of third-party forensics experts and identified unauthorized activity on a single server located in Japan. I love that they would want to like offshore this statement too, right? Like, it's not here. Yeah, the hack server's been used for internal testing. Oh, and it's only a testing machine. Yeah, for ETNS.
It's fine.
Sony's taking it's all good. Nothing to see here, boys. Ransom VC has now made available 2 gigs of archive files allegedly containing information stolen from the Japanese electronics giant. The second incident, though, is one by Klopp, right? And it's, guess what, Tom? This is why I wanted to include this article. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's Move It again. Right? We're seeing this with the MFT, managed file transfer software to gain access to hundreds of organizations. Cybersecurity firm Imisoft has counted more than 2,300 impacted organizations. All right, I just wanted to get to that point. We're down to almost 62 million people affected by Move It, right? Like, this is ridiculous proportions.
Wild.
Oh, goodness gracious. What are your thoughts on it, man? I mean, 2 hits and one.
I have so many thoughts.
Both of them being disclosed.
That's bad luck, like that sucks. I can't imagine. Like, dealing with one incident is bad enough, but then you get two from 2 threat actors at the same time with 2 different motives, 2 different sets of TTPs. That's a bad day. It's mostly disappointing, though, that this is another Move It incident. I mean, we are well beyond the excuse period. There is no logical reason you could not have patched, unless you're out of support and too cheap to buy it again, or I don't know. Like, if you have that in your network, or WSFTP for that matter, same company,
which is the next one we're going to start talking about from Progress, right? That's the other piece.
Love of God, please patch it.
We'll talk on that here in a minute.
So, yeah, I don't even know what to say. Like, I lose a lot of sympathy when you tell me it's Move It at this phase.
Well, let's roll the next beautiful bean footage, I suppose. All right. So LockBit is actually claiming the largest demand in history now of 80, or no, I think it's third largest. Yeah, third largest ever in history to CDW, right? There's so many people use CDW. CDW delivers all the way down to the end user. You can buy a server from them. They'll deliver it right to you, right? Service providers use them all the time. Number 4 on CRN's 2023 Solution Provider 500. They haven't commented. LockBit 3.0's claimed to have stolen data from the company, which the group said will be leaked. And I actually saw this during that time, and I'm not sure that they have leaked the data or not. It would have been on Thursday. But LockBit is also claiming that CDW has offered to pay $1.1 million, which they went on to say in their public article that it was insulting. Right? They were insulted by them posting $1.1 million as an answer to this. There's other 2 known demands. One was the Media Market by Hive, which is $100 million, 240 million, and then $100 million to Acer by Revel back in their existence days when it was a lot stronger there, according to a previous ranking by Equinix's William Thomas. The $80 million appears to be the largest ever by LockBit, a prolific Russian-speaking cybercriminal group. LockBit has demanded $70 million from TSMC in June. So you're seeing this escalation, right? And we saw this. The national, ransomware report kind of showed it dropping, right? Last year, we saw this this kind of cliff and somewhat related to, from some people's aspirations, the ongoing infighting from geopolitical challenges, including Ukraine, and so you see that maybe hopefully being distracting. But now here we see they're getting larger and bolder with their demands. They're definitely doing multiple types of double extortion, even triple extortion, right? Where they're now extorting the end victims themselves, and taking it from that perspective, or the end victims' customers in that regard. So, anyways, just another one of those. But we're seeing things hit this very, very high number of demands coming from LockBit. And there was a chart I saw the other day that LockBit 3.0 I think has collected the most in ransom of all of the gangs out there right now. So,
they're good at what they do. They're very talented. You have to give them that.
That is true. All right, I'm all bad news today, y'all. I'm so sorry. If you want to put pause and come back in like 12 minutes, it's like bad news Sally day today. So I'm so sorry. We'll keep going on it though. Let's bring up the next news article. All right, Cyberattack shakes California's Simpson's manufacturing. This is, I think, really, really, really nascent. This is just ongoing. It says ongoing probe into widespread damage. In the latest cybersecurity news development around the cyber attack on Simpson, there's an extensive investigation going on to see how much the damage is there. Right, the giant post on their cyber attack. Recently, significant disruption occurred in the operations in a leading engineering, manufacturing, and building products company based in California. Has 5,000 employees globally, right? Like that's 2.5 Pax8s, right? If you really get into that, it's a really large operation. Details: the disruption originated in a cyber attack on the 10th. As a result, they had to fill out an 8K. You're starting to see back to that cybersecurity reporting regulations and requirements by the SEC, right? So we're starting to see faster disclosure. I mean, this is what, 2 days they had this disclosed. I mean, this is the 13th. So it's awesome. However, in reaction, the Simpson cyber attack, the building equipment manufacturer implemented an urgent plan to deal with the crisis. Shut it all down, boys. Everything's connected. Everything's terrible. We're done. The nature and the extent being pursued in connection with the aforementioned cyber attack is under investigation. So, Dom, this is one of those where we're talking about, people filing. So we have 8K forms filed, but we also have this response of containment, meaning complete containment of the system, complete containment of all operational systems. They even talk about how, it's going to be really slow. We're going to be really bad operationally. We're going to bumble. We're going to fail stuff because we have no systems. And, so you're really getting into, they don't even know how big it is as a breach, but we can surmise from the amount of shutdown that it could be quite broad. It could be, full DC compromise. And full
it could be broad. It could be, it could be the whole system's owned, or it could just be like they don't know. So it's a tough one. My first instinct too is, you shut it all down, so it's all bad. But it could also be like they're not entirely sure what to isolate, and they're trying to do something, which obviously the outcome isn't great, but that's not a bad course of action if you're just
I don't want to miss this point real quick, Dom. I don't want to miss this point.
Yeah.
According to the company's comprehensive annual report for the fiscal year, March 26, 2022, consolidated net sales rose by 34.5% to $2.12 billion. That's my challenge. We see the growth in these companies, and they don't spend the money on cyber. We see the growth in these companies. I'm making some real leaps of judgment here, y'all, so don't beat me up over this too much. But my point is, we don't know what happened there. But it is all too often that you'll see massive growth in companies, but no massive growth in the security teams, no massive growth in the capabilities, no massive growth in the budgetary aspects of that. And so I'll wag my finger at all of us, I suppose, for that, and that we need to all be better at understanding as we grow. We need to overcome and realize that our asset has grown in value, and we may need to be more stringent in the way we approach how we protect that asset, right? And I think that's kind of the piece that's missed oftentimes. So, all right, next one. We'll just keep the hits on coming. This is BianLian extortion group claims the recent Air Canada breach, right? And so I feel like I get to talk about this, having recently obtained my honorary Canadian citizenry from Rob Ray for winning a trivia contest, which I think is fair. And so I'm able to talk about this one. But Air Canada, the country's largest airline, and a founding member of Star Alliance, obviously, which I use. The threat actors also shared screenshots of the stolen data on their dark web data leak website Proof. BianLian claims to have exfiltrated technical and operational data spanning from 2008 to 2023, including details about companies' technical and security challenges, right? This is that operational map that I might give to somebody else to attack again, right? SQL backups, personal information of employees, data regarding vendors and suppliers, confidential documents, archives from your company databases. Employee personal data is only a small fraction of the valuable data over which they have lost control, the cybercrime gang said. For example, we have SQL database with company technical and security issues. You can check it out for yourself. A demo package with screenshots is available. I want to focus in on that. Let's come back to you and me, Dom. So the conversation here, we're talking about how they're almost taunting and bringing up these security things, and here's your demo packet, and right, like
Right.
let's talk about just that part of this, right? It's got to be brutal.
Yeah, that translates to free trial for me, right? Like a proof of life,
Yeah.
right? Especially if you have a 200 gigabyte data set.
It's a finger.
I can get away with giving you 100 megabyte of that, and you do something to prove that that's Air Canada or that's valuable to you. So they're literally giving away free trial of other people's data. Like this is a very, very common thing in these marketplaces. Especially, it's pretty bold as to claim like I compromised Air Canada. That's a bold claim.
Sure.
So I think this prove it method is really good. What really interests me is like their operational and security challenges. Some threat actors post those words to just sort of antagonize, right, or rub salt in the wound of the victim, which I think is probably what this is. Or are they actually going in and saying we found documents or information of some form or fashion that say we've known about sucky security for a hot minute, and now I'm going to share that information to again rub more salt in the wound.
The other side of this is like if you've ever been in like marketing or cold calling type of endeavors, you like get this lead list, you beat it to death, and then ultimately it goes to some other poor bloke, and then they take it as a lead list, and rinse and repeat it, right? It's almost like maybe that's what's playing out. It's like you should have, all right, I got this SQL with all this horrible data. All right, I'm done. I'll just give it to the next guy. It's your list now. Go get what you can out of this juicy onion. But okay, so this is the last one, and I really want to cap it off with this, Dom, and this brings us all the way back full circle to the beginning of this conversation. We actually now starting on September 30th, 2023, Sentinel-1 has observed actors exploiting the recently disclosed flaws in Progress WSFTP against Windows servers, running a vulnerable version from the CVE 2023 40004, and then ultimately CVE 2023 42657, which were assigned perfect 10 and 9.9 respectively. Like a perfect 10, just like diving or skating, folks, is
a hard score to get,
perfect.
Man.
Yeah, it's up there. It means it's fully leverageable. We observed at least 3 types of multi-stage attack chains, which began with exploitation and then commands to download a payload from a remote server, often from IP or literal URL. This active in the wild exploitation marks the third wave of attacks versus Progress software. I don't think it's third wave of attacks, third wave of discovered horrible vulnerabilities that are wide-reaching and above 10. While exploiting is likely opportunistic, organizations of the information at TMSP software will definitely be targeted, right? You're getting back to that same aspect of they'll be targeted. They go on to show some of the shell code that's being run from W3WP, and actually executing some of that config and downloading it in there as well. But attack chain, anyways, we don't need to keep beating the full attack chain to death. There's a lot smarter folks who break that down for you, like John Hammond. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are seeing the counter evidence and the reason of the existence of CISA's secure by design and secure by default mantra, which is this understanding that for far too long with a low maturity buyer, we can build shitty software. I know who the executive is. I won't dox him or her, but they've said to me before, Matt, a lot of money is made on shitty software. And it's true until you can't anymore. And until you have a maturity level that rises, or until you have a demand or risk level that rises. And so you're starting to see that impact is happening. You're starting to see where the evidence of a poor CI/CD delivery pipeline and ways you're going to integrate security into the stack and the way you build things turn into these massive vulnerabilities that are so far reaching and have so many challenges down the road. So anyways, this was today's bad news brought by Dom and Matt. We're going to find all positive news.
That was a rough one, man.
Like it was a bad one.
But also, for the love of God,
really
patch your FTP software. What is it? WSFTP?
WSFTP, yeah.
Or get the whole damn protocol off your network. That's what I would do. But just do something, because I don't want to be talking about your incident. What is it? When did Move It happen? It's been months, like 4 or 5
It's been at least
months?
3 months, 4 months.
3
Yeah,
months?
I remember I was driving back from Denver that night, and I was just looking up open and exposed servers that were vulnerable and sending notifications to people. Yeah.
So we don't want to be talking about your incident in 3 months because you haven't patched the software. So go patch the software.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, I think we're done making people sad from this perspective. So why don't we maybe choose the most cheery and amazing driven human I get to work with on a constant basis to give us just a few minutes of her time. Let's switch over to Robin Harris for a level up segment.
I want to talk to you about security operations. And in particular, how there are some things we need to consider about our security operations to make sure that as the environment becomes more sophisticated, as there are more risks, we have done our due diligence to make sure we are able to deal with those risks. Everybody's enamored by AI. Everybody's using it more and more and more. Lay people, business people, it's going to become deeply, deeply embedded, not just in our work lives, but in our lives, right? And with that, we need to start thinking about how do we implement security measures that are in line with defending against risk that can come as a result of using AI. And it's emerging, talking about AI governance, and various governments are looking at it, and we can probably expect some legislation if the industry doesn't self-regulate. But we're going to have to do something to make sure we don't actually give the bad guys the loaded gun, right? We don't want to do that. This thing is going to be so deeply embedded into our businesses and into our lives that we don't want to just close our eyes and pretend like there are no risks that go along with it. There are risks. And one of the things we need to look at, unfortunately, it means that we probably need to spend more money on training our people, our security people. We probably need to spend more money on having more sophisticated tools. There are AI security tools to combat AI. Yeah. So we're going to have to really take this in, that this becomes part of our operations. It becomes the cost of doing business. And the more sensitive your data, the more you're going to have to invest in protecting it. I know that each of us, we are consumers. We go to the doctor, so our medical data is out there. Our financial data is out there. Our kids' data is out there. All of this data we're entrusting to all of these businesses. We have a right to expect them to keep our data safe, right? Well, our customers also have a right to expect us to keep their data safe. It's kind of like the golden rule. We want our data to be protected, and we protect our customers' data. We protect our vendors' data. We protect our employees' data. It's just good business. And companies that do that will actually have an advantage in the marketplace when compared to those businesses that just don't want to make the investment.
All right. Sage words, as always, and uplifting comparative to our negative intro to this, obviously. So, Dom, you and I just got back from a, as you would say, momentous event. I think that's what you said in the chat there. Yeah. It was called Momentum, and it was a brand new event. And what was interesting about it, and we'll get to a video we've brought prepared of this idiot speaking and teaching in it. But what we've found is that if you can separate the nerdy bit group from the salesy bit group, but then also bring them back together to make sure they're saying the same thing and working towards a common goal, then you can increase the success of an MSP. And that's what this event was. So let's kick off to the best part of that. Not David Powell's. His was not best. He may call this whole prom king thing his reason for being there. But Dungeons and Dragons was pretty cool too. So come on over to the nerdy side with this. I got a few minutes of this Mac guy talking about breaking down cybersecurity controls.
When we go back to that use unique passwords, I might not even use a password manager. In fact, at Pax8, I've never put a password in my password manager. Can anybody guess why?
Because you use the same password for everything?
I'm not that guy, Chris. Can anybody guess why I've never put a password in my password manager at Pax8? That's it too.
Yes.
Don would probably say because I don't do any real work. But the answer is because everything I need is SSO'd. I don't have any other stuff I sign into. It's all tied to Pax8 single sign-on infrastructure. I've been living that way as an MSP since 2018. When you start realizing trying to apply 5.6 means I should have less in my use unique passwords bucket, doesn't it? It would mean that I would actually, if I approached this first, and sent those applications in SSO, I would actually destroy the need to even deal with them from a use unique passwords perspective, wouldn't I? Right, so you get into an interesting place where looking at the later safeguards, 5.6 and 6.7, basically mean you must use SSO. And at Iconic, we started by saying, hey, every vendor that doesn't have SSO, I'm firing you in 1 year. No problem. It's $1 million a year. I'm gonna fire you in 1 year. And we got SSO. Pax8 was one of those, right? And it was one of those things where having those standards and starting to try to apply these things, you realize I really can't do it the other way without a lot of exceptions. I'd have to write an exception to this policy of why I brought on a new application that did not offer SSO to me and brought it into my organization to serve my clients, right? And so just wanted to give some front shadowing context. Sometimes it's helpful to read the next safeguard so you at least know, as you're thinking about IG1, what you're gonna need to be doing next.
Or even control 2.
So, yeah, true. So when it comes to mapping these safeguards, our vendors already got this, right? Like they're sending you a list of what their safeguards are that they meet and how they meet them and how you need to implement them. Everybody's got that?
And there's supersets of all of them.
No, they're not doing this. As a matter of fact, that's what started me about 2.5 years ago, starting down a data project to try to convince vendors that it was valuable for us to actually map to frameworks, right? They didn't think it made sense. They said, well, we don't need to do that. The MSPs are the practitioners, they know how it works. But if you think about that exercise we just went through, and we will be going through, of saying, okay, use unique passwords, that's a password manager. Have segmentation of access. Oh, cool, I can use my password manager and not share those. These all come back to the same capability, and I'm like, what if they already had that mapped? What if they already said, hey, if you do this, you can meet this one, that one, this one, that one, that one. Now, granted, take it with an understanding that you can't do anything without
people, process, and procedure.
And policies, all of those. So understand that even when I stand up here and say I'm going to map CIS, I'll be mapping the technical capabilities. And so we've started down a data project. If you saw it Beyond, did anybody make it to Beyond? If so, thank you. It was awesome. I'd love to see you next year. But at Beyond, we talked about being able to surface for you gaps in CIS. Well, you got to have data to do that, don't you?
Well, Dom, we had a good time in there, right? Like you were part of it.
We did. That was a good show, and everyone was really, really engaged. You know, I was working one of the groups in the tabletop, and they were kind of just doing it. Like they didn't need a lot. They were thinking about it. They were discussing it, and that's massive. You don't get a lot of that. Yeah. So I think that the content was super valuable, but I also think, like you said, we took the people that needed to be in that room and put them in that room.
Yeah, and that's what you get when you get to segment that out. Is you can work with the people who not only were technical, because there's a lot of owners that were technical that are now selling, that are part of the sales side of it, that need to be in the other room.
Right.
Right. But you can take those, the practitioners that are there thinking about it, that are trying to implement, they're trying to make sure they meet what they say they're selling. Those guys and gals being in the room are engaged. They are the right people in the room. They were, and I agree with you. I think I got several things that people came up with where I was like, extra points, like 100% extra points right there. Right. Like you absolutely get this situation. And so I think it was very engaged. I think people were thinking about it the right way. And most importantly, I think they walked out with a broader understanding of what is an asset and what is software that I'm touching, and the things that are necessary to actually protect and control those. And so I think it was just a really good conversation, and everybody was bought in. We went on to do a Miro exercise, which we'll talk about later, maybe at some other time. And but you got the benefit of seeing both sides of this particular event, right? Because you got to kind of come and go and pop in and out. What do you think stood out the most to you? I did,
and that's
in the event?
That's rare for me. I'm normally stuck, getting there at 7 a.m. and doing the whole prep, and that wasn't me for this show. So I think seeing, what we're teaching in terms of practicing and applying and developing and implementing is great, but it doesn't work if nobody buys all the stuff you're practicing and implementing, right? So I think
it's true.
What we're finding here between the practical tactical education we're doing, and then that sales and marketing piece, it's not just sales and marketing, it's focused sales. It's how do I grow my customers into something where I can now apply all these new skills I've sent my people to get, right? How do I make them understand the risk profiles that we have to live with in today's world? Just the reality of the world, right? Not FUD, the reality of the world, fear, uncertainty, doubt. And I think that's really going to be a huge game changer, right? It would have been for me when I started. I know it would have been for you when you started, when we get into here's the real world, right? And here's the real conversation that your customer can understand that's going to allow you to get in the door and implement these things and make it better, right? I think that's what we really achieved. And I think a lot of partners took that away. And on day 2, Rex came in and his team, and they started talking operations and the bits and bytes of, if you're going to build a security offering, you talk about margin and the very, very businessy piece of that, which is something everyone also needs. So it was a really good mix of content. And I hope, and I heard after the event, people loved it. So I really hope everyone that was there got good nuggets and is taking action on it now.
Yeah, Chris Johnson was nice enough to do that with me. And if you're not familiar with Chris's role, he's at CompTIA, and he actually gave every person that went to Momentum a free CompTIA membership as an MSP. And so basically said, hey, listen, come be in CompTIA. But he's driving Trustmark. And the reason we even built that 2.5 hour breakout that we did together on the technical side was really around how does an MSP start to meet these more stringent safeguards and controls that aren't tied to some limit of scope, that are tied to anything that ever touches client data and access. And so, Chris is nice enough to come and do that exercise with us and work through that with us. And I've presented that now 4 or 5 times, but I do believe this was the most engaged and the most number of people. I think we had 40 or 50 in our room right when we started.
Room.
Yeah. And so I was quite surprised by that and pleased. And, and it's just getting better and better. And I think at some point, I'll be able to literally hang my spurs up and be like, I don't have to teach anything anymore. They got this. I'm out. Like, it was done, wrapping it up. So
that's the goal.
Very happy to see. It was fantastic. So very good. When we talk about that, what are we trying to build at Momentum, at least on my side of the house, is security operations and security delivery. It really is. How are you as a team going to deal with 10.1 and ensuring that malware protection is on all things that are assets allowed to touch, store, or process data? How are we going to? That was the whole point of this, was the how. It was all about the process. It was all about learning. And I can use process because of that whole Canadian thing we talked about earlier. But I think that, it's all about the operations of it. And I couldn't be here in the middle of this cybersecurity month and not bring in people that are part of our operations and have conversations around that. And we really like to take this show during this month to highlight those unsung heroes that really protect the thousands of people across the globe that are the victims when this happens. If you see every one of these breaches we talked about, there's an operations team on the other side of that had post-traumatic stress disorder, that had to deal with things for years, potentially with the feds, that had to have a question, their reason to be involved in cybersecurity, especially at the tactical delivery end of it. So I like, to unabashedly say how much I love the fact that we have teams of humans like the people we're about to bring on. So let's do this thing. Let's go ahead and bring in our guests. All right, Nick and David, we're going to ask you to do a little bit of kind of introduction of yourself and tell me a little bit of history about you and what your current role is at Pax8 from a security operations perspective. I'm going to make you guys Rochambeau to see who goes first. So who wants to go first here?
Oh, okay. I guess I go first. There
you go.
Mix in. So I'm a security engineer here at Pax8. I guess a lot of what I do is the testing, architecture, designing and implementing a lot of different tools, seeing what we need, seeing what works with what we need, and just using those said tools to help secure our environment.
That's awesome. I actually want you to go ahead and put him back up, and go ahead and put his actual logo back up again, his title back up for me. Why don't we do a little thing? Let's educate the audience. We're going to get rid of some acronyms right here. So you have CISSP, CCSK, and OSWP. Do you mind describing what those certs are after your name? Because they're actually really, really important. I'd be very proud of them if I was you, and I want to let you have your opportunity to talk about them.
Oh, sure. So the CISSP, oh man, I forgot the acronyms at this point.
Certified Information System Security Professional for CISSP. So I get your acronym. Yes. Dang. Okay.
So here's the CISSP. Yes. That one was a very interesting certificate. That it was probably the hardest certificate I've probably took. And it really has so much insight. Yes, so many, such a broad level of everything. I thought people were exaggerating, but then you got to really learn so many aspects of security. Many of which I've never really directly worked with. Most security engineers haven't directly worked with. You're even learning about things like the different types of fire extinguishers, that have to,
height of a security fence and whether it's a deterrent or not, right? Exactly.
Exactly. That was,
Yeah, and the
yeah.
other ones are
My-
CCSK. And really, for anybody who
Yes.
doesn't know, the CISSP, and I am self-bragging because I have the similar letters, so it's okay. I'll be humble and not humble at the same time. But the CISSP, for people who don't know, is done by ISC Squared. And ISC Squared, which I don't know what the acronym stands for, so if anybody wants to get a steal with their Googling,
Internet
they can.
Security Consortium.
No, that's a negative point for
Squared.
Dom. That's you can't just
Yeah,
toss out
got
Squared
that.
and call it done. That's not how this works. Anyways, but ISC Squared is one of the most renowned out there bodies of testing and certification. They actually require you to have attestation of your work history. You have to have somebody sponsor you and sign and say, yes, this is really somebody that's in the security industry. And the test of that is considered a master's degree in the UK. If you have a CISSP, it is equivalent to a master's degree out of college in the UK. And so it's a very interesting aspect of that certification is a broad one. It doesn't go very deep. It's extremely very shallow in each of those categories, but it does go extremely broad across 8 different domains, and it's amazing. CCSK, which I also have,
Right.
and he does
So I
as
got
well.
it though,
is
because I
Okay,
want to
what
share
is
it
it?
for the audience. It's all squared, so because it's in parentheses. But anyways,
Sure.
International Information System Security Certification Consortium. So we'll just call it ISC Squared. That's a lot of words.
Yeah, that's a lot of words. CCSK is by CSA, Cloud Security Alliance, and CCSK is the Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge. I believe, if I'm incorrect, correct me. And then the last one you had was the OSWP. Can you share on that? It sounds like you like to do a little bit of wireless war driving, maybe potentially in your skill
Yes.
set.
So I honestly didn't know what to put as my last one, but I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and throw the OSWP on there because
It made me
I think
happy
out
in
of
my nerdy heart.
like I think out of all the certificates I took, that one was probably the most fun I've had
Agreed.
doing a
Yeah,
certification.
That's cool.
So what you actually have to do for that is you're given a like a lab, and that lab has 3 Wi-Fi's that you have to hack into. So you have to go and do a whole bunch of different
Practical.
strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to crack all the passwords to each and every single one of those Wi-Fi's. And yeah, when I finished it, it was especially the last one. The last one, it had like a trick question where you had to spoof your MAC address too, because it had like
Sure.
MAC protection on top of the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you had to
And then
be
you
a
do all
Mac that
that,
you had captured.
or-
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, and
So it's funny.
I put that
Yeah,
on
go
there
ahead.
because it was my favorite certificate. You know, I might go for the OSCP sometime soon, but
Do the
OSWP
PNPT.
was
It is so beautiful. PNPT is the next one you should do. It's so fun. It's so practical.
PNPT.
It's very yeah,
Okay.
Practical Network Penetration Tester from TCM Security. They basically just give you a domain to attack and then do an external pen test and an internal and gain domain admin. That's the whole rules. That's everything. It's not Jeopardy based. It's an actual real network simulation. It's a blast. It was fun. I cried. I laughed. We had fun. So anyways, I'll tell a quick story as well. So whenever I first got my Google G1, I was using a Cantenna because I didn't want to pay for internet, allegedly. Has it been 10 years? Okay, it's fine. So I was using my Cantenna to break all the WEP encryption on all the wireless networks around me, and I had them all marked on this little like tripod, and so I could just turn it to Bob's house, to Janice's house, to Bill's house, and change it in DDWRT. But then I got this idea. I was like, there wasn't good cellular signal at the time. And so I got this idea that I would just crack all of the WEP. This was back in that day with AirCrack NG all the way to my office from my house so that my phone could just randomly hop to the next Wi-Fi that it saw and had a credential for. And so I kept, cellular signal. There was a time, boys and girls, when you didn't have data everywhere you drove, right? And so I had to get data through Wi-Fi cracking. Anyways, sorry, tangential to your OSWP.
Allegedly.
But yeah, allegedly. Yeah, allegedly, of course.
So, have you heard of the new tool Flipper Zero?
Oh yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I've played with it quite a bit.
What Flipper Zero used to be based off of was the Ponagachi, which was like
I remember it.
Wi-Fi version. Yeah, that's exactly the concept that you're talking about.
You made me think that's nostalgia, bro. I hadn't put that together. That is amazing. You're 100% right. Okay, I don't want to steal any time from David. I want to go through the same question. David, listen, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to force you to do the same thing. Tell me what your acronyms mean after this, and then we'll go from there. Tell me what you do.
I'm the manager of security operations, and I do a lot of balancing team resources now. Still a lot of engineering and stuff that goes into it, but now it's more of management level and trying to put the talent where it needs.
Yeah, and I see you have the CCSK, so we won't beat that one back to death. But ITIL actually got asked on a panel yesterday, and it was brought up, and I looked it up yesterday. It still is not stuck apparently. So if you actually know what that means and can articulate it, you get the points on this one for the acronym on your ITIL.
So ITIL is all about service lifecycle management, incident lifecycle management. It's all encompassing. That was just the foundational certificate, so it was pretty dry. It was a long course of just logically talking through these things. No hands-on experimentation except for note-taking. And it was pretty rough in that aspect, but once you get the gist of it, it's not too hard.
Are you a kinesthetic learner? Do you prefer to learn by moving stuff around and doing it? And to your point and reference there,
definitely.
Me too, brother. Yeah, 100%.
I mean, you were talking earlier about how we got into security, and a lot of what I've learned is all self-taught, just out of curiosity. Building web pages when I was like 12. And then sending links to my friends, but they couldn't open it because it was a file stored on my desktop, and I didn't know that yet.
Yeah.
It's
brilliant.
Figured it out later.
Right. The FAFO model early on, right? Like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. It'll either work or it won't. Dom may have allegedly even had his run-in by playing with web pages and things in a different context too, right, Dom?
It's not impossible.
Sit here and tell hacker stories, or are we not saying that on air yet? But
it has been 10 years, but
yeah, that's what I gave as my rule of thumb.
I learned about phishing before the word was cool, put it that way.
By some nice 3-letter agencies. Yeah.
We can probably tell stories off camera.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll do that later. In fact, we'll do that in the behind-the-scenes show version. Yeah. But ITIL stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. There's plenty of levels of it and the things you go through. And I think it's really important, though, to talk on when it comes to being in security operations, because operations is security. I said this before the show. I don't think you can separate the hands-on tactical aspect of humans touching stuff like IT systems from the security thereof. Right, the governance thereof, those aspects of it. And so it really does become important when you're talking about IT and you're talking about the infrastructure and the information technology, and to your point, the engineering that goes into how we design systems and how we work with those systems. That's key and principle to delivering security. And ITIL is a foundation of that language of how we're going to speak, of how we're going to actually talk about technology and operations we're dealing with. So I think it goes right hand in hand directly with that. So one of the things that you answered that I wanted to get out of my other guest here with Nick is, why did you get in cybersecurity? What brought you there? Was it just because you enjoyed the nerdy bits of it, or did you, like me, get punched in the face so hard your eye doesn't go straight anymore, and now you got to deal with security the rest of your life? At least that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I guess for me, I used to play a game called Roblox back in the day. And it's been around for a lot longer than people think. But
I know.
I used to make little Roblox hacks into those games. And what's very different compared to like hacking other games is there's so much you can do when hacking Roblox, because you can actually inject scripts and programs, and you can do stuff you can't really do in other games. Like, for example, I remember when I was like a kid, I spent like a week writing up this one script, and I would hop in a game where everyone's role playing, working at Burger King or something like that. The next moment, everyone's in the Hunger Games. You can just
awesome.
do a bunch of groundbreaking things.
You know what's cool about that though is when you think about hacking, that's my definition of hacking. That's where it came from. It's the ability to realize something around you is manipulable and then manipulate it. Right. And if you've ever cut in line in recess, you're a hacker. But it does sound like you come from that side of things, from where your view of security comes from. So where did it translate from poking at Roblox and abusing other kids' day to actually wanting to be in the cybersecurity defense side of things in this way?
Well, I did have a few years over in red teaming, doing pen testing and stuff like that. But I guess a big part of it was, I don't know, I really enjoyed both aspects. Of course, while hacking got me into it, I went to that's what got me into, I guess, hacking. But what got me into security was actually attending a cybersecurity conference. And the first one I went to was like Hacker Halted in Atlanta. And that really opened my eyes. It's not in Atlanta anymore. I think this is the first year they're doing it in Miami or something like that. But I really enjoyed it. Doing CTFs, but what I really liked was hearing how passionate people were about what they did. And this is all blue team stuff. Yeah, they were so passionate about like what they like. I went to a lot of
protecting the data, being the hero, winning, keeping people safe, driving the security of an organization, like all of that, right? Like, exactly,
they were talking about like securing ports, doing like, it was a lot of basic stuff because this was back then. I didn't know what it was, but I saw how passionate they were about it, and I wanted to learn about it. Yeah. So
that's awesome. Very cool. Well, what's interesting about that too is when we talk about cybersecurity, and I make it as a equation to a football game, right? If you see a football coach step out on the field and say that he's never going to allow a single down against him, he's never going to allow a single yard against him or her, you would fire that coach, right? They're not a good defensive coach. They obviously don't understand offense and how this is going to work. And in the same way, if you were a defensive coach, you'd never learned offense, how would you defend yourself? And you bring in an interesting aspect of being a defender through the lens of an attacker. And you're starting to bring in that your background in that, red team side and attack side means that you can bring context and understanding to the decisions being made on the defense side, right? And I think that's what was so interesting is you got to watch this go from I'm attacking ports to, wait, somebody's just going to turn off the port so I can't just walk up to the wall and plug in? That's unfortunate. That makes it much harder, right? Like, anyways, I digress. Okay, got off on a dang tangent. That was fantastic. So when it comes to operations, you're the manager of operations, David, and you have to kind of run all of that. And you said earlier before the show that one of your roles is really balancing the resources, limited or otherwise. How challenging is it to balance resources from a reactive perspective and dealing with the things you have to do on a day-to-day, as well as balancing those things that are in your heart that you just want to accomplish, that are the things that really matter to you in your security mind as a manager?
The actual responsibilities and obligations versus playing in the sandbox. Right?
Yeah, and learning and trying and going. Yeah.
It can be difficult. My wife would get on to me because, why are you still working? It's 9 p.m., but, I'm not working. I'm just playing around with virtual machines.
I'm learning and playing.
Yeah. There's a lot of experimentation that we're doing whenever we can, but one of the things that I've tried to push and have in the team is some extra time that we spend in the day doing kind of what you want to do. Go out there, go threat hunting, find gaps, find policies that need updating, find things that are not working as they're supposed to. And you really have to have like Nick's mindset. You have to be curious about those things, and you have to go digging and kind of know what to look for in a way. That's just one of the balancing acts that we have to play all week.
And I think you guys are extremely successful. One of the things that I'll touch on was we had a bit of an event, right? And I think that's important to know when we're talking about this. Language matters. Event versus incident, incident versus breach. You should never say the B word unless somebody else says the B word to you with a legal degree and premise and all of the things that come with that, right? But that said, right, when you think about that, being able to triage those differences and those nuanced things, you guys dealt with an event of mine almost instantaneously. I got reached out to personally to ask questions and contextualize the challenge. And say, hey, Matt, is that you? Are you messing with us again? I know that's a lie because I've never messed with you. But the point being, you asked the question to get context and you dealt with it and you isolated the machine and you did it rapidly. And I think for me, getting to watch that operationally play out was just, I don't know, it warms my heart, right? Because I know that people are out there not making me a hypocrite as I go talk about security to others. I know I've got people inside of our organization that are doing the things. And just hearing you say that right there, let them go do what they want some of the day, allows people that really care, like Nick, you can see he's extremely passionate about what he does in the same way. Go and just do that and learn from others, cross department, work with other people on the team that have different strengths, look for things and try to find things that are broken. I think there's a corollary for MSPs there. Dom, when you think about that, how does an MSP incentivize people to fix stuff that's broken when there's a million broken things inside their organization?
You rely on the inherent nerdiness. I always hesitate to say nerd, but we're all nerds,
Love it,
right?
the
But
nerdy bits.
you rely on the fact that they love what they do, right? That you've put them in a position that they can take their own action and frankly do cool shit is what I used to call it. I still call it that with 100%. My people. Let them do cool shit when they have time to do cool shit, and you get ridiculously cool results out of it that you never would have expected. True. Right? And David, I'm sure that's been your experience. Things come your way that is a solve that's probably been chewing on your brain for months and it's fixed, right? And that's a really neat moment as a leader.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I think that's the point. You know, David, to Dom's point there, you know, can you call up on one of those where you got a story where something just clicked and you got it? I try to put people on the spot because I'm a rude human being.
I can't think of anything specific. I would take your event as a good example of
sure,
but that was something we recognized right away, because literally 2 weeks before then we were playing with the OMG cables and running those PowerShell scripts from the run the command prompt, right? So whenever we got an alert for it, I recognized it right away. And that was my first reaction was, I'm going to message Matt. And if he doesn't answer back in a minute, then I'm sorry. He's going to lose internet for a while.
As you should. As you should.
Yeah. But I thought he's probably just playing with an OMG cable or the USB rubber ducky. It could be anything. But I guess you weren't.
Well, and what was interesting is the first half of it was actually what really triggered. And it was right. There was somebody using a interesting novel methodology to gain the first piece of it. But the cable was something that was stored in memory from a year ago when I accidentally was trying to send a OMG cable to a virtual machine inside my organization. And it did not go to the virtual machine. It went to the first machine, and it caused it to dump that payload. And what was interesting, though, is I got to watch y'all not only do the containment. When you deal with incident response, folks, the first thing you really want to do is contain as much as possible. Find out and stop the damage and stop it from spreading. Do the things that you can do there that is non-destructive to the forensics, but containment. So that's what they did. They first isolated my machine, said, okay, let's contain this thing. Let's dig into it. Once they needed to know more, they rapidly said, fine, I'm leaving this contained. Box it up, leave it where it is. I've got what I need. We're going to have you ship it to us. We're going to ship you a new one. And I had a new one in a day, right? And the next day I was up and running. But during that time, I got to watch the forensics play out and working with external teams and y'all coming to the conclusion of what did we actually have? And what's great about it, take a lesson from this MSPs, there was no panic. There was no everything's the worst it can be. It was actually just, we have to dig into this. We need to know what actually is going on. We need to be able to make decisions and move forward. And I think that was what stood out to me the most, was just watching it get disseminated down to what actually happened and watch the operations play out in that way. And I don't know. It was just very heartwarming when I'm out there pointing fingers so much. It's nice to have some backup back behind me in that regard. So
yeah, and kind of going back to what Dom said, right? We would not have recognized that as quickly if we didn't have the free time to do cool shit.
Yeah, and build the knowledge, that tribal knowledge of understanding of what you're seeing. And I think you actually just made a point for me that I've been trying to make for a while, David. And this is that, Dom, I believe, and I'd like to take your thoughts on this, that MSPs should learn red team tactics, that you should have the understanding that when you see something, you go, I know what I'm looking at right now. You know, the first time somebody said to me, you have Emotet and you have to get your client dealt with and you're going to have to wipe everything, it didn't mean anything to me. Now, I know exactly what it means. I know exactly what has happened. I understand the context and the impact of that, and I know what it's going to mean down the road. So what are your thoughts on that? Should MSPs learn to hack? Should MSPs learn red team operations?
I think it depends on the MSP, right? So short answer, yes, but with the understanding that if I'm a one-person shop, I should not spend my days on try hack me. But I should really understand the brains and the thoughts and the techniques of different threat actors and what's going to come at me, right? So I might start with like industry research and understanding what the phases are. But if I have people, someone's doing some try hack me and starting to really understand the ins and outs of what are Windows vulnerabilities and what protocols and services and things are coming out, and then they're trying them, right? One of my favorite, I use loosely is a malware run-ins I had it's called Cofter. It's all JavaScript, it's all in memory. It's a real pain in the ass to get rid of, but it presents itself because the code sucks, right? So it'll show you these random errors. Well, to a user, that's just like, Windows encountered a problem, or
you got a bug that popped up. Oh well.
But because I had studied that, I was like, no, that's Cofter, right? And my friend Kyle had an endpoint on this machine, and his team started emailing me like, yo, that's not an error message, that's Cofter, right? But I started to have that understanding. So I think when you have the resources, because I don't want to encourage a one-person shop to spend all the time red teaming.
Sure.
That's not going to help you. But if you have people, get them studying the ins and outs of it, and then get them doing something, right? Get them into a lab with whatever's come out on the latest threat reports, whatever, something.
It's funny. So you mentioned TryHackMe, and I'll go ahead and say it as well, and maybe ask the other two if you guys have used TryHackMe at all. But my wife has been, and she's watching right now, my wife has been doing TryHackMe. I think she's at 23 days now in a row of not missing it. And I think the best part I hadn't thought about this is, it is actually such a great gamification methodology, whether you use Hack the Box or TryHackMe. And it's a gamification method to learn and to understand things in very small bite-sized doses. The other piece is, I really like watching people struggle to learn basic computer technologies. So I've really gotten a kick out of watching my wife work on TryHackMe. She's like, why can't I get this? Because case sensitivity in Linux, cat. I tease. But, yeah, so it is a fun time, and there's good training. So what do you think, boys? Do you guys participate in platforms like TryHackMe from a learning perspective? I'll just go to each of you real quick in a rapid fire. Nick?
So I played around with it a little bit in the past, but then these days, I actually like spinning up my own labs. OWASP has a great, they have like their own great lab that I love to use. But, adding on to what you were talking about earlier, I do think it's a pretty important aspect to, learn at least the basics. And I can give an example when Log4j, first came out, I use that example a lot, but for multiple reasons. But when that first came out, nobody knew how to fix it. So the first thing that we had to do, people barely knew how to detect it.
Yep.
So the first
and
thing
how deep they had to detect it too is another side.
I mean, no one knew what Log4j was. We have to remember too.
Yeah.
That was
They're pulling a real straight Log4j for me, so I'll try to shut up here. You keep going.
But the first method of detecting it that came out, this was even before the CIA released their own detection thing. We already had one up and spinning because what we did is we had to find out how to exploit it. And through that method, that helped us allow to detect it on our own assets.
Our own assets, rules, and your own things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think it's pretty important. And that's like, because I had to figure out how it worked, where it came from, et cetera. And that's my opinion on, why it's so important for people to know the basics.
Well, imagine being an MSP that has no idea of that. And they have no capability of deciding that. And all they get is panic, right? And I think that's the point, is that you have to figure it out yourself. And if you don't have a NIC, you have some real challenges as an MSP, right? And not trying to make his salary go up, David, or any of that, what I mean? But ultimately, at the end of the day, David, what are your thoughts? Have you used TryHackMe as a professional? I'll let you know I'm in the top 1%. I still try to stay there. I practice every day where I can. It's been a while, though.
I think I played with it a little bit, but I couldn't really get into it, or I had other things come up that shifted my focus again. I spent a lot of time a couple years ago playing around in over the wire, those bandit.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like capture the flag.
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
But I mean, sometimes I scratch the surface of those. Sometimes work gets in the way.
Yep. I'll leave everybody with a nugget on that, though. If you go to tryhackme.com, it is free. You can sign up. they actually do have a lab that comes out, and that might actually be paid in the $10 or $14 a month, whatever it is. But they actually have a lab where they'll simulate new CVEs, and you can actually sign up to the list of these new CVEs. So every time a new CVE comes out, you now have John Hammond showing you how he did a Jindy command inside of JavaScript-based Minecraft, right, and things like that. And so you get to actually play with it tactically. And back to David's earlier point, I learn the most by moving stuff around with my hands and watching it collide the wrong way and not work or work and all of those things. It brings me back to a real quick thought from your Log4j, since you brought it into talk. Dom and I did a data research project about a year and a half ago, right after 2 years ago when Log4j was announced. And we looked to see how many Unify controllers were out there that were still unpatched and also subject to PwnKit. Right, and so I could actually combine the Log4j as well as PwnKit, the PolKit vulnerability, to gain access through a non-privileged user inside the database of Unify, and then escalate privilege with PolKit and patch their Unify switches and Unify devices for them as a threat actor. I didn't do it because that's illegal, and there's not enough years have passed to talk about it. But the point is that it was blown away by 5 months later. Dom, do you remember what percentage most cities were at still having unpatched Unify controllers?
Man, it was a lot. I don't remember. It was a while ago. It was
like
bad,
70%. It was like 70% still weren't patched 5 months.
I kind of want to run it again, though. Like, let's.
I don't. I almost don't. I'm curious, like, I just don't want to cry in my heart. But I would actually like to.
You know what we need? We need a statute of limitations on patching. So if you haven't patched your Move It by now, then it's no longer. Yeah, exactly. Like you're immune now, full immunity.
Anyways, didn't mean to take us on a tangent there, but that is brilliant.
That was a fun
anything
project.
Anything else
though.
to close us out with, right? We actually really, I anticipated us talking about operations more, but instead I got to geek out with all the people with similar letters and talk about fun cyber stuff. So I apologize for anybody watching that felt that was just a giant expose in our nerdiness. But anything to close us out with, boys? I'll start with you, David.
I would say kind of what Dom was saying earlier about MSPs kind of keeping up to date on these things, just watching the latest news and maybe spending some time learning the very, very basics. The very basics, the building blocks to understanding the rest of it, right? So you understand the basics, you understand the more advanced stuff and the more intermediate stuff. And then maybe you could train users on phishing. Because users and phishing will always be the weakest link.
There's a Nietzsche quote that goes with this that says, if someone wants to fly, first you must learn to crawl, walk, run, and jump. One doesn't simply fly into flying. And it's this understanding that you can't just simply be there. You have to be in every one of those phases. You have to suck at it. You have to get better. You have to learn. I think it's extremely well said, David. Thank you. Nick, you want to close us out with anything? Any thoughts?
Oh, man.
No, we got to get the flag for the week. Actually, that's the one I've got to put in. I'm running out of time here. I got to get the flag in. How about you introduce the flag? What's this one? What do we need here, there, Nick?
I don't know what the flag is.
No, you just got.
That's right. We got it.
Ask the producers to bring up the flag.
Here is the flag, guys. The flag is down below.
Oh, there we go. Okay, got it.
Here we go. What is the flag? Oh, that's a much better font this week.
That's a much better font for this. Claire's not being as abusive to us in this capture the flag. That's awesome. And she's probably even going to copy it right this time and not like copy it with the wrong letter. I'm just teasing. Claire's going to throw things at me soon. I'm going to get in trouble. If you haven't seen it, here's the flag. Capital H, VX, capital L, K, H, capital U, O, Zebra, Tango 2. That's the flag. Awesome.
There's a space in there. 2 spaces.
Oh, there's no space. There's no space. They wouldn't do that to us. That's horrible. Yeah, there's spaces.
Oh, there's
so we're good.
There's a space.
Nick,
hey, space is
I'll
an
let
ASCII
you close
character.
us out, buddy. What do you have to say to close it out for MSPs?
Oh, for MSPs? Wait, you mean like thanks for watching kind of thing?
No. Anything educative advice? You can tell us your favorite cookie recipe. I don't care.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess, I don't even know what to say. Just keep up to date. Make sure your systems are patched. I guess that's it for me.
That's sage advice still, man. That's many companies that were taken down. I'm looking at somebody with a Plex server even eventually, right? So keep it up to date.
Oh, speaking of media server, I actually got my media server got hacked last week because I left one of my APIs open.
Oh no!
So make sure all your APIs are secured.
That's humility in action right there, Nick, and I love you for it. That's telling on yourself because we're not perfect, none of us, myself either. So I love it. That's a great way to close it out. Dom, wrap us up, boys. Thank you for being
so
here.
much
David,
for
Nick,
joining us on the game. That's our show for the week. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Join us next week. We're going to have our Director of Security Operations on the show, and he's going to talk a lot about hearts and minds in the executive roundtable and working with our CISO. So that should be a really important one to attend to talk through the conversations with your customers.
That bridge.
And don't forget to join us next week for Pax8 because there will be another flag, and we definitely won't forget to give you the flag. So that's our show. We'll see you next week.
This time either. No. Claire fixed it.